John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m.
And in order for her to say what you wanted her to, you lied to her, right?
Yes.
Kill that clown! Kill that clown! Kill that clown!
Do you feel anger or even hatred towards men?
I never hated men, but now I do.
I got a message that Eileen wanted me to come meet her at the local jail.
I'm fairly comfortable with him. I've been at the Catholic services. I'm the server for the priest.
Prepared.
I'm prepared. I'm all right. I'm all right with it.
Living in prison every day is a struggle, even at its best.
A bit and admit that jailers, like at the Tucker farm down in Arkansas, who get
depending on a mood, that would trigger one or.
I just was in shock. We're only 15.
Man who didn't dress or look any different than lots of student types.
Physical objects, my possessions, other people's.
rituals that I felt I had to go through to protect myself. Again, it's embarrassing. I was a youngster.
I must have been a terrible accuser to her, a terrible accusal of what a rotten mother she was. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on.
And I went to a strip cell 2 cells down, where all I had was a mattress over a hole in the floor.
Oh, gee, you don't mind me. You know, she kind of got hung up on my looks or whatever. You know, I mean, she's a gorgeous young lady. I picked them up. We drove into town about 2 miles, 3 miles. I dropped them off. I got some gas and kept right on going. And I panicked. I thought I just locked the car keys.
Eileen Carol Wuornos. Eileen Carol Wuornos was an American serial slayer. In 1989 to 1990, while engaged in street bodywork along Florida highways, she shot and robbed 7 of her male clients. Wuornos asserted that these men had either physically attacked or attempted to physically attack her, and she claimed the slayings were acts of self-defense. She received a sentence for 6 of these slayings and was executed on October 9, 2002 via lethal injection after spending over a decade on Florida's Row. In the 2003 film Monster, Wuornos' life is depicted from her initial slaying to her ending.
All they were was shot and left. If it was a horrendous crime, why didn't I shoot him between the eyes?
I got a message that Eileen wanted me to come meet her at the local jail.
You know?
She's been called the damsel of death and the hooker from hell.
In the execution chamber as a liar. And I cannot go in the execution chamber and be executed.
I'm telling you, man. No, I wasn't born bad. You guys got it. I'm trying to tell you, man, they lied.
Cold blood.
Yeah, and I got to come clean that I killed those 7 men in first-degree murder.
And in order for her to say what you wanted her to, you lied to her, right?
Yes.
But I'm coming clean before I go in that execution chamber and be executed. That I killed them.
Charlize Theron's portrayal of Wuornos earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress. In May 1974, at 18 years old, Wuornos was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for DUI, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. Later, she faced additional charges for failure to appear. In 1976, Wuornos hitchhiked to Florida and married 69-year-old yacht club president Louis Gratzfeld. Their marriage was short-lived, marked by confrontations and violence. She returned to Michigan after their annulment. Her life took a darker turn in 1981 when she was arrested for armed robbery in Florida and sentenced to prison, only to be released in 1983.
Prepared.
I'm prepared. I'm all right. I'm all right with it.
Do you feel anger or even hatred towards men?
I never hated men, but now I do. I'll let them know that I know that the cops knew who I was after it.
Case number 91-463, to death for the murder of Troy Burris.
On in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure. Thank you, and probably see, I'll be up in heaven while y'all are rotting in heaven. I think they had some kind of eye in the cell, I'm not sure, but every time I started writing something, it went up higher.
Over the years, she faced multiple arrests, including attempted forgery, theft, and car theft, often using false identification. In 1986, Warnos met Tyria Moore, a motel mate in a Daytona Beach gay bar. They became partners, with Warnos supporting them through bodywork. They were detained for attack in 1987 and accused of attacking a Daytona Beach bus driver in 1988. Throughout her turbulent life, Warnos struggled with mental health issues and attempted self-hurt multiple times. Despite her violent crimes, she professed a deep and complex affection for Moore, a sentiment she maintained until her ending. Number 14. Margie Velma Barfield. Margie Velma Barfield was an American serial slayer who was convicted of 1 slaying, but who eventually confessed to 6 slayings in total. Barfield was the first woman in the United States to be executed after the 1976 resumption of capital punishment and the first since 1962. She was also the first woman to be executed by lethal injection. Velma Barfield was born in Eastover, North Carolina, but was raised near Fayetteville. Barfield's father reportedly was physically abusive, and her mother, Lillian Bullard, didn't intervene. She escaped by marrying Thomas Burke in 1949. The couple had 2 children and were reportedly happy until Barfield had a hysterectomy and developed back pain. These events led to a behavioral change in Barfield and an eventual drug addiction. Burke began to drink, and Barfield's complaints turned into bitter arguments. On April 4th, 1969, after Burke had passed out, Barfield and the children left the house, and when they returned, they found the structure burned and Burke lifeless. In 1970, Barfield married a widower, Jennings Barfield. Less than a year after their marriage, Jennings passed away on March 22, 1971 from heart complications. In 1974, Lillian Bullard, Barfield's mother, showed symptoms of intense diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea, only to fully recover a few days later. Later that year, during the Christmas season, Bullard fell ill again with the same symptoms, but passed away in the hospital a few hours after being admitted on December 30, 1974. In 1975, Barfield was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks and sentenced to 6 months in prison. She was released after serving 3 months. In 1976, Barfield began caring for the elderly, working for Montgomery and Dolly Edwards in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and passed away on January 29, 1977. Just over a month after the demise of her husband, Dolly experienced symptoms identical to those of Bullard and passed away on March 1st. Barfield later confessed to the slaying of Dolly Edwards. The following year, Barfield took another caretaker job, and this time for 76-year-old Record Lee, who had broken her leg.
Velma Barfield was convicted and sentenced to die in 1978 for the poisoning death of her boyfriend, correctional facility in Raleigh. But last week, for security reasons, say corrections officials, she was moved to Raleigh's from the execution chamber, a constant reminder, she says, of her likely fate.
It's total, isolation from it. The week I was here was the worst week that I have spent. Everything
Barfield
about
says
it
drugs led her.
Was just like that. Years of living in prison every day is a struggle, even at its best. I'm sorry for the hurt that I've caused so many people.
On June 4th, 1977, Lee's husband, John Henry, began experiencing racking pains in his stomach and chest, along with vomiting and diarrhea. He passed away soon afterward, and Barfield later confessed to his slaying. Another victim was Rowan Stewart Taylor, Barfield's boyfriend and a relative of Dolly Edwards. Fearing he had discovered that she had been forging checks on his account, Barfield mixed an arsenic-based rat poison into his beer and tea. Edwards passed away on February 3, 1978, while she was trying to nurse him back to health. An autopsy found arsenic in Taylor's system. After her arrest, the body of Jennings Barfield was exhumed and found to have traces of arsenic, a slaying that Barfield denied having committed. Although she subsequently confessed to the slayings of Lillian Bullard, Dolly Edwards, and John Henry Lee, she was tried and convicted only for the slaying of Taylor. Songwriter Jonathan Byrd is the grandson of Jennings Barfield and his first wife. His song Velma from his Wildflowers album gives a personal account of the slayings and investigation. Number 13. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial slayer and physical offender who physically attacked, tortured, and slayed at least 33 young men and boys in Norwood Park Township near Chicago, Illinois. He became known as the Slayer Clown due to his public performances as a clown prior to the discovery of his crimes. Gacy committed all of his slayings in his ranch-style house. Typically, he would lure a victim to his house and dupe him into donning handcuffs on the pretext of demonstrating a magic trick. He would then physically attack and torture his captive before slaying them by either asphyxiation or strangulation with a garrote. 26 victims were buried in the crawl space of his home, and 3 were buried elsewhere on his property. 4 were discarded into the Des Plaines River. Gacy had previously been convicted in 1968 of the sodomy of a teenage boy in Waterloo, Iowa, and was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment, but served 18 months. He slayed his first victim in 1972 and had slayed twice more by the end of 1975, and slayed at least 30 victims after his divorce from his second wife in 1976. The investigation into the disappearance of Des Plaines teenager Robert Peast led to Gacy's arrest on December 21st, 1978.
I'm fairly comfortable with him. I've been at the Catholic services. I'm the server for the priest.
Wanted to speak with each of the lawyers separately. He took me aside and he wanted to thank me for trying.
What are you doing? And Gacy said, you know what, can this wait? Can I talk to you in a while? We said, no, John, it can't wait. I mean,
yeah. During a Chicago news conference late this afternoon, Gacy's lawyers say that the 7th U.S. Court of Appeals addressed a point not to.
John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m.
Yeah, I think that's it. To tell you the truth, I don't know. I was real angry with the whole situation.
His conviction for 33 slayings by one individual then covered the most homicides in the United States legal history. Gary was sentenced to death on March 13, 1980. He was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correction Center on May 10, 1994. On November 7, 1968, Gacy pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomy in relation to Voorhees, but not guilty to the charges related to other youths. Gacy claimed Voorhees had offered himself to him and that he had acted out of curiosity. His story was not believed. Gacy was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd and sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. That same day, Gacy's wife petitioned for divorce, requesting she be awarded the couple's home and property, sole custody of their 2 children, and alimony. The court ruled in her favor, and the divorce was finalized on September 18, 1969. Gacy never saw his first wife or children again. During his incarceration, Gacy rapidly acquired a reputation as a model prisoner. Within months of his arrival, he had risen to the position of head cook. He also joined the inmate JC chapter and increased its membership from 50 to 650 men in less than 18 months. Gacy secured an increase in the inmates' daily pay in the prison mess hall and supervised several projects to improve conditions for inmates, including the installation of a miniature golf course. He was presented with a Distinguished Service Award for his efforts within the inmate JC chapter in February 1970. In June 1969, Gacy was denied parole. To prepare for a second scheduled parole hearing in May 1970, he completed 6 high school courses, obtaining his diploma in November 1969. On Christmas Day 1969, Gacy's father passed away from cirrhosis. When informed of his father's demise, Gacy collapsed to the floor sobbing. His request for supervised compassionate leave to attend the funeral was denied. Number 12. Nico Allen Jenkins. Nico Allen Jenkins was an American spree slayer convicted of committing 4 slayings in Omaha, Nebraska in August 2013. The slayings occurred within a month after he had been released from prison after serving 10.5 years of the 18 years to which he had been sentenced for a carjacking committed at age 15 and for attacks committed in prison. Jenkins stated that he committed the slayings at the command of the ancient serpent god Apophis. He was found competent to stand trial, found guilty of the 4 slayings, and was sentenced to demise in May 2017. At about 5:01 a.m. on August 11, 2013, a patrol officer discovered 2 bodies in a white Ford pickup truck parked near a swimming pool at 18th and F Street in Spring Lake Park. The two victims, identified as Juan Uribe Pena and Jorge C. Sajica Ruiz, had been shot in the head and their pockets turned inside out. They were lured to meet two women for a physical encounter. The slaying spree began with this random double slaying less than 2 weeks after his release from prison on July 30th.
I want hearsay, not hearsay, but to say.
4, 7, and 10. Count 3, CR 13-2768.
Black book. So this was them, my little cousins, the one that were in the house with me. That when I got
middle of a hotel with a shop. Thing to gain from telling the police what she saw that night, and everything to lose.
Describe the weapon, yes. It's a high point.
On August 19th at around 7 a.m., the body of Curtis Bradford was found outside a detached garage at 18th and Clark Street by a man returning home from a night shift at a convenience store. Investigators arrived to find 2 bullet wounds in Bradford's back. It was later revealed that Bradford and Jenkins had posed for a Facebook photo posted the day before. Bradford would be the only victim familiar to Jenkins. Jenkins' fourth and final victim, Andrea Kruger, was discovered on August 21st at about 2:15 a.m. by a deputy sheriff responding to a shots-fired call. Her body was found lying on the road at 168th and 4th Street with multiple 12-gauge shotgun wounds to the face, neck, and shoulder. Kruger had been returning home after a bartending shift near 178 and Pacific Street. Surveillance footage showed her locking up the Deja Vu Lounge at 1:47 a.m. At 6:30 that evening, Kruger's gold 2012 Chevrolet Traverse SUV was found abandoned 12 miles away in an alley at 43rd and Charles Street. Later that week, a news conference was held by Douglas County Sheriff Tim Dunning, in which he stated that investigators believe the SUV had been abandoned roughly 2.5 hours after being stolen and that a feeble attempt had been made at setting the vehicle's interior ablaze. Number 11. Theodore Robert Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy was an American serial slayer who kidnapped, physically attacked, and slayed dozens of young women and girls during the 1970s and possibly earlier. After more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 slayings committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. His true victim total remains unknown to this day. Bundy often employed charm to disguise his intent when kidnapping victims and extended his tactic vis-a-vis law enforcement, the media, and the criminal justice system to maintain his claims of innocence. His usual technique involved approaching a female in public and luring her to a vehicle parked in a more secluded area, at which point she would be beaten unconscious, restrained with handcuffs, and taken elsewhere to be physically attacked and slayed.
How far you go? Okay, right here? No.
Just my reports.
Reports? Is there another report?
Yeah, right here on the back of this. I chopped.
That's all I have. Bundy?
However, before the recess, the court wants to admonish you that voir dire examination having begun.
See what happens. It helps to live in the moment, in the essence that we use it productively.
To this end, Bundy typically simulated having a physical impairment, such as an injury, to convince his target that he was in need of assistance with something, or would dupe her into believing he was an authority figure. He frequently revisited the bodies of those he abducted, grooming and performing intimate acts on the corpses until decomposition and destruction by wild animals made further interactions impossible. He decapitated at least 12 of his victims, keeping their severed heads as mementos in his apartment. On a few occasions, he broke into homes at night and bludgeoned, maimed, strangled, and/or physically attacked his victims in their sleep. In 1978, Bundy was arrested and jailed in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal attack. He then became a subject in a progressively longer list of unsolved homicides in several states. Facing slaying charges in Colorado, Bundy engineered 2 dramatic escapes and committed further attacks in Florida, including 3 slayings before his ultimate recapture in 1978. For the Florida homicides, he received 3 sentences in 2 trials and was executed at Florida State Prison in Rayford on January 24, 1989. Number 10. Wesley Allen Dodd. Wesley Allen Dodd was an American convicted serial slayer and physical offender. In 1989, he physically attacked and slayed 3 young boys in Vancouver, Washington. He was arrested later that year after a failed attempt to abduct a 6-year-old boy at a movie theater. Don wrote detailed accounts of his slayings in a diary that was found by police. After pleading guilty to the charges of slaying, he received the penalty. After refusing an automatic appeal, he was executed by hanging on January 5, 1993, the first legal hanging in the United States since 1965. On September 4, 1989, Don went to Vancouver's David Douglas Park with a fish fillet knife and shoelaces and sought out young boys to slay. He lured 2 brothers, 11 and 10-year-old Cole and William Neer, to a secluded area where he forced them to undress, tied them to a tree, and performed intimate acts on them both. When he was done, he knifed them repeatedly with a knife and fled the scene. The boys were soon discovered in a park. Cole was lifeless at the scene, while William passed away en route to a nearby hospital.
Again, I've been molesting kids nonstop since I was 13 years old, over half my life. I'm not going to say who, but there is somebody out there. There's a man out there.
There's a man.
Yeah. They are going to think twice before they do anything again.
How do you live with yourself daily?
I think about what I've done. I think about some of the things the boys said before they died. In a way, yeah, I think it'd be a relief. I don't have to think about all these things anymore.
After the slayings of the 2 brothers, Don started a scrapbook with newspaper clippings and other facts about the slayings. On October 29th, Don drove to Portland, Oregon, where he encountered 4-year-old Lee Isley and his 9-year-old brother Justin at a local park. The younger brother was playing alone on a slide, and Don succeeded in convincing the boy to come with him. Justin had gone home, so Don told Lee that he would drive him back to his house. He managed to take Lee to his apartment in Vancouver, apparently unnoticed, and he ordered the boy to undress. Don then tied Lee to his bed and molested him, taking photographs of the attack. Don kept Lee overnight while he continued to physically attack him, all the while jotting down every detail in his diary. The next morning, he strangled Lee to death with a rope and hung his body in the closet, photographing it as a macabre trophy. He would later confess to police that he had originally planned not to slay the boy, but eventually decided that it was necessary to keep him from telling anyone. Don stuffed Lee's nude body in trash bags and threw it in some bushes near Vancouver Lake. He burned Lee's clothing in a trash barrel except for the boy's underwear, which he kept as a souvenir of the crime. One day later, Lee's body was discovered, which sparked a manhunt for the slayer. Don kept a low profile and mostly stayed in his apartment, writing down future plans for child abduction and also constructing a homemade torture rack for the next victim. Number 9. Carol Edward Eddie Cole. Carol Edward Eddie Cole was an American serial slayer who was executed in 1985 for slaying at least 15 women and 1 boy by strangulation between 1947 and 1980. He confessed to a total of 35 slayings. At age 8, he retaliated against one of his classmates, a boy of the same age named Duane, by drowning him in a lake in Richmond, California. The demise was regarded as an accident by authorities until Cole confessed to it many years later in an autobiography he wrote in prison. As a teen, Cole committed several petty crimes and was frequently arrested for drunkenness and minor thefts. After high school, he joined the U.S. Army but was given a bad conduct discharge in 1958 for stealing pistols.
Fast. Does that made you on that 5-year sentence? It wasn't. That wasn't enough to delay this. That's always occurred, but. Are you sorry? For the victim? Yes. Just also because I not suffered, but I thought about it.
In 1960, Cole attacked 2 couples parked in cars on a lover's lane. Soon afterwards, he called the police in Richmond, California, where he was living, and told them that he was plagued by violent fantasies involving strangling women. On April 9, 1981, Cole was convicted of 3 of the slayings committed in Texas. He was sentenced to life at the Huntsville prison. In 1984, Cole's mother passed away, and his attitude was reported to have changed. He agreed to face further slaying charges filed in Nevada, even though it could possibly mean the penalty. In November 1984, Cole was extradited to Nevada, where he was tried and convicted for the strangulation slaying of 2 women in 1977 and 1979. In October 1984, Cole was sentenced to death in Nevada. When his sentencing was passed, he said, "Thanks, Judge." Sometime before his ending, he reportedly converted to Catholicism. Number 8. Ricardo Richard Leyva Munoz Ramirez. Ricardo Richard Leyva Munoz Ramirez, dubbed the Night Stalker, the Walking Slayer, and the Valley Intruder since his attacks were first clustered in the San Gabriel Valley, was an American serial slayer and physical offender whose crime spree took place in California between June 1984 and August 1985. He was convicted and sentenced in 1985. He passed away in 2013 while awaiting his ending. Ramirez's childhood is considered an influence on his crimes. Frequently attacked by his father, Ramirez began developing gruesome and macabre interests in his early and mid-teens from his older cousin, who also taught him some of the military skills that he would go on to use during his year-long slaying spree. Ramirez also cultivated a strong interest in Satanism and the occult.
These things, contribute to a person.
He took a woman in her 60s and stomped her to death with his foot.
And at some point in life, he explodes.
Upon walking into a room after he entered a house, he strangled, he used a ligature, he used a tire iron on a young girl.
Why did you kill those people?
No comments.
By the time he had left his home in Texas and moved to California at the age of 22, he had began frequently using cocaine. Ramirez would often commit burglaries to support his drug addiction, many of which were later frequently accompanied by slayings, attempted slayings, physical attacks, and attempted physical attack. Ramirez's highly publicized home invasion and slaying spree terrorized the residents of Greater Los Angeles and later the San Francisco Bay Area over the course of 14 months. However, his first known slaying occurred as early as April of 1984. This crime wasn't connected to Ramirez, nor was it known to be his doing until 2009. Ramirez used a wide variety of weapons and different slaying methods, including handguns, various types of knives, a machete, a tire iron, and a claw hammer. He punched, pistol whipped, and strangled many of his victims, both with his hands and in one instance a ligature, stomped at least one victim to death in her sleep, and tortured another victim by shocking her with a live electric cord. Ramirez also frequently enjoyed degrading and humiliating his victims, especially those who survived his attacks or whom he explicitly decided not to slay, by forcing them to profess that they loved Satan or telling them to swear on Satan that there were no more valuables left in their homes that he had broken into and burglarized. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 14 counts of slaying, 5 attempted slayings, 11 physical attacks, and 14 burglaries. The judge who upheld Ramirez's 19 sentences remarked that his deeds exhibited cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez never expressed any remorse for his crimes. He passed away on June 7, 2013 of complications from B-cell lymphoma while awaiting ending on California's row. Number 7. Oscar Ray Bolin Jr. Oscar Ray Bolin Jr. was an American serial slayer and convicted rapist who was executed in Florida for slaying. In 1986, Bolin kidnapped and slayed 3 young women in Tampa, Florida. He was later connected to a forged slaying in Texas in 1987. The slayings went unsolved for nearly 4 years until the husband of his ex-wife called a tip line and implicated him. He maintained his innocence to the end. On January 25, 1986, 25-year-old Natalie Blanche Hawley, a night manager at a Church Fried Chicken restaurant in Tampa, finished work and locked up the store for the night with a colleague. She left the store around 1:30 a.m. and headed to her car. Her body was found hours later by a morning jogger. She had been knifed to death.
Natalie Blanche Hawley had been stabbed about 12 times in her upper torso.
And you can see Blanche here and me here. My ex-husband calls me and says, "I have some news. Your sister's dead."
On November 5th, 1986, 17-year-old Stephanie Collins, a Chamberlain High School student, disappeared after finishing a shift at a drugstore. On December 5th, 1986, her body was found wrapped in sheets and towels. She had been knifed to death and her skull was also crushed.
Prosecution will never admit what they did. I am innocent of the murder of Terry Lynn Matthews. I have maintained my innocence all the time.
They execute someone who absolutely did not commit that murder.
So you're innocent?
There was another man confessed to it.
There is no connection to Oscar Ray Bolin to this offense.
The same day Collins' body was found, 26-year-old Terry Lee Matthews went missing. Her car was outside a post office with the engine still running. Her body was located later that day in some woods, wrapped in a white sheet.
Right over here is where Terry's body was dumped, right here on the embankment. When Terry Matthews' body was found and subsequently Stephanie Collins on the same day.
Her throat had been cut and she had been bludgeoned. Number 6. Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells was an American serial slayer. Though only convicted of 1 slings for which he received the penalty and was eventually executed, authorities believed he committed a total of 22 slings.
I don't have no feelings no more, no emotion. It's not the person, it's about the sensation of what you're into. When people enter my life, they get hurt.
Sells himself claimed on various occasions to have slayed over 70 people. Police investigators believe Sells slayed at least 22 people. Sells said he committed his first slaying at age 15 in Mississippi after breaking into a house. While in the house, Sells claimed to have discovered a man performing fellatio on a boy and slayed the man in a fit of rage.
He's a notorious and admitted serial killer.
I like to use a knife. A gun is too violent.
Yeah, you're putting them out of the misery they would have had if they had to live through all that.
That's the best I can answer it.
This confessed crime has not been confirmed. Furthermore, in 1980, Sells claimed he slayed a man with an ice pick near a Chinese restaurant in Los Angeles, which has also never been confirmed. Number 5. Edmund Emil Kemper III. Edmund Emil Kemper III was an American serial slayer who slayed 8 people, including a 15-year-old girl, his own mother, and her best friend from May 1972 to April 1973. Years earlier, at the age of 15, Kemper had slayed his paternal grandparents.
What were you convicted of?
8 counts of first-degree murder. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds.
Kemper was nicknamed the co-ed slayer, as most of his non-familial victims were female college students hitchhiking in the vicinity of Santa Cruz County, California.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
So how come they get in a car with somebody at that time?
She judged me not to be that guy.
Most of his slayings included necrophilia, decapitation, and dismemberment. Found sane and guilty at his trial in 1973, Kemper requested the penalty for his crimes.
If I were to have been executed in a timely fashion.
No, they're talking about close to 100 right now.
I was saying that 10 years ago.
Capital punishment was suspended in California at the time, and he instead received 8 concurrent life sentences. Since then, he was incarcerated in the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Number 4. Anthony John Jack Sully. Anthony John Sully was an American serial slayer and police officer responsible for the slayings of 6 people between February and August 1983 at his warehouse in Burlingame, California. Sully placed some of the corpses of his victims in metal drums and poured concrete over them, after which he dumped them in Golden Gate Park. At least 3 people acted as his accomplices in the crimes, but never reported his activities to the police. Sully would later be found guilty of the slayings in July 1986 and sentenced to demise. On June 3, 1986, Sully was found guilty on all counts by jury verdict, on the basis of which, just 12 days later, he was sentenced to death. After the announcement of the verdict, Sully made a 40-minute speech professing his innocence. His main accomplice, Tina Livingston, accepted a plea deal with the San Mateo County Attorney's Office. In exchange for a life sentence, she would act as a key witness for the prosecution and give detailed testimony in each case, for which she would be charged with negligent homicide. Livingston was convicted in the summer of 1986 and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, but was released with time served, as by the time of the court decision, she had been in prison since her arrest in August 1983. Michael Francis was convicted as an accomplice in the Barrett slaying in January 1986 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a chance of parole after 25 years. The same punishment was given to Sully's last accomplice, Kelly Burns, who was convicted in the slayings of Thomas, Melendez, and Oakton. Number 3. Robert Fratta. Robert Fratta, 65, received a lethal injection at the state penitentiary in Huntsville for the fatal shooting of his estranged wife, Farah. She was shot twice in the head in her home's garage in the Houston suburb of Atascocita in November 1994. Prosecutors say Fratta organized the slaying-for-hire plot in which a middleman, Joseph Pristash, hired the shooter, Howard Guidry. Fratta had long claimed he was innocent. Fratta was pronounced lifeless at 7:49 p.m.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Robin Allen Fratta, guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
What was funny was I wasn't very attracted to her physically.
I'm glad justice has prevailed, freedom has prevailed.
Fratta's spiritual advisor, Barry Brown, prayed over Fratta for about 3 minutes before the ending began. Brown, who had his prayer book on the pillow next to Fratta's head and his right hand resting on Fratta's right hand as he was strapped to the chamber gurney, asked for prayers for hearts that have been broken, for people who grieved and those who will grieve in days ahead. He also asked God to be merciful to Bobby. Asked by the warden if he had a final statement, Fratta said no. Brown then resumed praying as the lethal drugs began flowing into Fratta's arms. Fratta took a deep breath and snored loudly 6 times before all movement stopped. Number 2. James Barnes. James Phillips Barnes was an American slayer and self-identified serial slayer who was executed by the state of Florida for the 1988 physical attack and slaying of Patricia Miller. After converting to Islam and saying that he wanted to clear his conscience, he confessed to the slaying in 2005 while already serving a life sentence for the 1997 slaying of his wife. In 2012, Barnes was featured in the first episode of Werner Herzog's television series On Row, in which he was interviewed by Herzog at Florida State Prison. He then sent Herzog a written confession to the unsolved slaying of Chester Wetmore and Brenda Fletcher. He wasn't charged in either case. On April 20th, 1988, Barnes invaded the home of Patricia Patsy Miller, a 41-year-old nurse in Melbourne, Florida. He entered through a bathroom window and confronted her at knife point before physically attacking her.
A jury convicted James Philip Barnes from Brevard County of murdering his wife and another woman in the late 80s.
If you were very spiritual, it would be like, oh, you have, a time to repent with a definite end date.
He attacked her with a hammer and bound her with his shoelaces while she was laying face down on the bed. Barnes set fire to her bed in an attempt to conceal the crime before fleeing. A medical examiner later determined that Miller had passed away from blunt force trauma to the head and had been slayed before the fire was started. According to investigators, Barnes didn't know Miller and her slaying went unsolved. On December 11, 1997, Barnes strangled his estranged wife, 44-year-old Linda Barnes, at her home in West Melbourne despite a restraining order that prohibited him from approaching her. After slaying his wife, Barnes stuffed her body in a closet and remained at the house. On December 12th, sheriff's deputies arrested Barnes at the house and he was charged with Linda's slaying. On January 9th, 1998, Barnes pled guilty to slaying Linda and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
It's hard for an individual to concentrate on the end result. When I finally did come out of the house, I had over 20 weapons pointed at me. That was severe panic.
The penalty was waived. In 2005, Barnes, who had converted to Islam, confessed to the unsolved slaying of Patricia Miller while fasting during Ramadan. Barnes sent a letter to the assistant state attorney confessing to the crime. In 1997, DNA evidence was matched to Barnes and he had been questioned in the case. At the time, he had refused to talk to Brevard County authorities. At his trial for Miller's slaying, Barnes waived his right to a jury and represented himself. In 2006, he pleaded guilty to the first-degree slaying of Miller along with burglary. On December 13, 2007, Brevard County Circuit Court Judge Lisa Davidson sentenced Barnes to death. Number 1. Kevin Underwood. Kevin Ray Underwood is a convicted slayer from Purcell, Oklahoma. Authorities had sought a missing 10-year-old girl, Jamie Rose Bolin, for whom an Amber Alert had been issued. Underwood, who lived near Bolin in the same apartment complex, was arrested on April 17, 2006. Underwood admitted to FBI agents and Oklahoma detectives that he had slayed and attempted to decapitate Bolin, telling them, "Go ahead and arrest me. She's in there. I chopped her up." After Underwood's confession, Bolin's corpse, stashed in a large plastic container, was recovered from his bedroom closet.
Kevin Underwood planned to brutally kill a little girl. He did it, then told the FBI all about it.
The only just verdict, just like I told the jury, was death.
Purcell Police Chief David Tompkins stated that Bolin's slaying was the culmination of Underwood's fantasy to kidnap a person, physically attack them, torture them, slay them, cut off their head, drain the body of blood, physically attack the corpse, and eat the corpse, then dispose of the organs and bones. Underwood was convicted of having bludgeoned Bolin to death with a wooden cutting board. Police stated that they found meat tenderizer and barbecue skewers at the scene, which they presumed were intended for use on the victim's body. On February 29, 2008, a jury recommended the penalty on March 7, 2008. On April 3, 2008, McLean County District Judge Candace Blaylock approved the recommended sentence. Underwood attempted to appeal the sentence because it would be an unconstitutionally cruel and unusual punishment due to his mental illness.
I want to thank Judge Blaylock and the jurors who made the decision.
The only one that did anything wrong was Kevin, and he did that on his own accord.
An Oklahoma City federal judge rejected the appeal. On July 1, 2022, Underwood was one of 25 Roe inmates to be scheduled for ending in Oklahoma. He was scheduled to be executed on December 5, 2023. His ending was later postponed due to a request by Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who asked for 60 days between endings rather than 30 to alleviate the burden on DOC personnel. He's currently awaiting a new ending date.
Crime. Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, is an infamous American serial slayer who committed a series of heinous crimes between May 1972 and April 1973. His victims included 8 individuals, among them a 15-year-old girl, his own mother, and her best friend. What sets Kemper apart is the chilling fact that he had also slayed his paternal grandparents when he was just 15 years old. Kemper gained notoriety as a co-ed slayer due to his modus operandi of targeting female college students who were hitchhiking in the Santa Cruz County area of California. His crimes were marked by extreme brutality, involving acts such as necrophilia, decapitation, and dismemberment. In 1973, Kemper stood trial and was deemed legally sane, ultimately pleading guilty to his crimes. Strangely, he requested the demise penalty, but it was not an option at the time in California. Instead, he was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Since his conviction, Kemper has been incarcerated at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. This facility specializes in providing medical and mental health care to inmates. It is a place where individuals with complex medical needs, including those with severe mental health issues, are housed and treated. Early life. Edmund Emil Kemper III had a tumultuous upbringing marked by dysfunctional family dynamics and early signs of disturbing behavior. He was the middle child of 3, with 2 sisters, Susan and Alan. His parents, Clarnell and Edmund Jr., had a strained relationship. Edmund Jr. was a World War II veteran turned electrician, while Clarnell often belittled his job as menial. Kemper's size was notable from a young age, weighing a staggering 13 pounds at birth and standing head and shoulders above his peers by the age of 4. However, his behavior was deeply troubling. At just 10 years old, he committed a horrifying act of animal cruelty, burying a pet cat alive, exhuming it, decapitating it, and displaying its head on a spike. This early display of sadistic behavior was an alarming sign of things to come. The darkness within Kemper escalated as he grew older. At 13, he slayed another family cat out of jealousy towards his younger sister, Ellen. He kept macabre souvenirs of this act hidden in his closet. Kemper also exhibited a twisted fascination with demise and violence. He confessed to deriving pleasures from deceiving his family about the cat slayings. Disturbingly, Kemper's imagination took a morbid turn. He engaged in bizarre rituals with his sister's dolls, culminating in their decapitation and dismemberment. With his elder sister, Susan, teased him about his teacher. He responded with a chilling remark about slaying her before kissing her. He admitted to sneaking out of his house, armed with a bayonet, to spy on his second-grade teacher through her windows. Kemper's childhood games were equally alarming. He played gas chamber and electric chair with his younger sister, instructing her to tie him up and simulate his ending. He would convulse and feign demise, imitating gas inhalation or electric shock. Alongside these unsettling activities, Kemper narrowly escaped demise on several occasions. His sister tried to push him in front of a train and into a deep pool where he nearly drowned. Despite his troubled disposition, Kemper shared a close bond with his father. However, when his parents divorced in 1961, he was sent to live with his abusive mother, Clarnell, in Helena, Montana. Their relationship was profoundly dysfunctional. Clarnell, a neurotic and alcoholic, subjected Kemper to constant belittlement, humiliation, and misuse. She even forced him to sleep in a locked basement due to unfounded fears that he might harm his sisters. Clarnell's cruelty extended to mocking her son's imposing stature, standing at 6 feet 4 inches, 1.93 meters, by the age of 15, and labeling him a real weirdo in conversations with his father, unaware that he was listening. Clarnell's emotional misuse knew no bounds. She refused to display any affection towards Kemper, fearing it would turn him bi, and repeatedly told him that he would never be loved by any woman. Kemper later described his mother as a sick, angry woman, suggesting she may have had borderline personality disorder. The breaking point for Kemper came at the age of 14, when he ran away from home in an attempt to reunite with his father in Van Nuys, California. To his dismay, he discovered that his father had remarried and now had a stepson. After a brief stay with his father, Kemper was sent to live with his paternal grandparents in North Fork, California. This arrangement further fueled his resentment as he described his grandfather as senile and accused his grandmother of emasculating him and his grandfather. In this tumultuous environment, Kemper's troubled psyche continued to evolve. His early years were marked by disturbing behaviors, including cruelty to animals, fascination with demise, and a dysfunctional family life characterized by parental neglect and misuse. These factors would set the stage for the horrifying acts he would commit as a serial slayer in the years to come. First slayings. Edmund Kemper's first slayings marked a horrifying turn in his already troubled life. Edmund Kemper's descent into violence began on August 27, 1964, within the confines of his family home in California. At the age of 15, he found himself in a heated argument with his grandmother, Maud Matilda Kemper. This altercation was a culmination of pent-up frustrations and unresolved issues within their already troubled family dynamic. In a moment of explosive rage, Kemper abruptly left the room, seeking solace in an act that would forever alter the course of his life. Returning with a rifle that had been given to him by his grandfather, Kemper stood before his grandmother. With chilling determination, he fired a single shot, ending her life in an instant. The brutality of the act was further underscored by the fact that Kemper, seemingly devoid of remorse, proceeded to discharge 2 more rounds into her back. The aftermath was nothing short of a macabre scene, with Maud's lifeless body bearing the horrifying evidence of Kemper's violence. In a haunting twist, her final words, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again," served as an eerie testament to the senseless brutality that had just unfolded. Shockingly, the violence did not cease with his grandmother. Some accounts suggest that Kemper, in a disturbing escalation of brutality, inflicting additional post-mortem knife wounds using a kitchen knife. This ghastly detail paints a vivid picture of the depths of Kemper's disturbed psyche. Tragically, Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Emil Kemper Sr., returned home.
As an ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life.
A bit and admit that jailers, like at the Tucker farm down in Arkansas, who get...
Am I a masochist? Am I looking to be tormented further? I'm trying to show you just how...
House and people who came by never left. You know? Whole families, individual travelers, would go on for years.
Depending on a mood, that would trigger one or the other. And out at the same time.
That means they run consecutively?
Oh no, that's the opposite of consecutive.
Yeah.
Consecutive, long and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing.
Do you think society should do in generally with serial killers?
Do with them? Like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but...
And feed them and house them and clothe them for decades. But...
Utterly unaware of the horrifying events that had transpired within the walls of his own residence, as he approached the driveway, he was met with a barrage of gunfire. The elderly man, who had likely just completed a routine grocery run, was gunned down, becoming another victim of Kemper's violent rampage. In the aftermath of the bloodshed, Kemper was left in a state of eerie calm. Faced with the weight of his actions, he reached out to his mother for guidance. It was her voice that provided him with the direction he sought. She advised him to contact the authorities, a directive that Kemper carried out with a chilling sense of detachment. The subsequent investigation and legal proceedings cast a harsh light on the disturbing motives behind these slayings. Kemper's confession revealed the disturbing truth. He had taken his grandmother's life simply to experience the sensation of slaying. In a perverse twist of logic, he justified the slayings of his grandfather as an act of sparing him the anguish of discovering his wife's lifeless body. Under the belief that the grief would be directed towards Kemper himself, psychiatrist Donald Lund, who would later analyze Kemper, offered invaluable insight into the warped psychology underlying these actions. He suggested that, in Kemper's deeply disturbed mind, these slayings were an act of retribution, a form of revenge against the perceived abandonment he had endured from both his father and mother. The gravity of Kemper's crimes was not lost on the court-appointed psychiatrists tasked with understanding the incomprehensible actions of a 15-year-old. His diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia painted a grim picture of his mental state, illustrating a mind plagued with delusions and hallucinations. Given the severity of his crimes and the complexity of his mental health, Kemper was deemed unfit for a standard correctional facility. Instead, he was committed to Atascadero State Hospital, a facility designed to cater to the needs of mentally ill offenders, providing them with specialized treatment and care. These first slayings marked a dark, harrowing turning point in Kemper's life. The brutality and calculated nature of these acts serves as a chilling testament to the depths of his depravity. They set the stage for a series of even more horrifying crimes that would cement Kemper's place in the annals of American criminal history. The events of that fateful day remain an indelible stain on the collective memory, a stark reminder of the capacity of unfathomable violence within the human psyche. Kemper's Atascadero rehabilitation journey. Edmund Kemper's life took a dramatic turn when he was committed to Atascadero State Hospital after the gruesome slayings of his grandparents in 1964. This period of imprisonment and psychiatric evaluation would reveal a complex and chilling aspect of his character. Upon his arrival at Atascadero, the initial assessments and diagnosis differed significantly from those made by the court-appointed psychiatrists during his trial. The California Youth Authority psychiatrists and social workers at Atascadero did not find the same signs of severe mental illness. Their reports indicated that Kemper did not display flight of ideas, interference with thought, delusions, hallucinations, or bizarre thinking. Instead, they noted his intelligence and introspective nature. Remarkably, Kemper's IQ was tested at 136 during his time at Atascadero, which was more than 2 standard deviations above the average. Later, he underwent another IQ test, yielding an even higher score of 145. These test results painted a picture of a highly intelligent individual whose mental capacity stood out in stark contrast to his gruesome crimes. Kemper's time at Atascadero was marked by his efforts to rehabilitate himself and portray himself as a model prisoner. He actively participated in psychiatric assessments and even received training to administer psychiatric tests to fellow inmates. This willingness to work cooperatively with the staff earned him the favor of the psychiatrists, who found him to be an exceptional worker. A psychiatrist later noted he was a very good worker, and this is not typical of a sociopath. He really took pride in his work. In a surprising twist, Kemper also became a member of the JCs while at Atascadero. More notably, he claimed to have made contributions to the field of psychiatric testing during his interactions with the hospital psychiatrists. Specifically, he mentioned developing a scale called the Overt Hostility Scale as a part of his work with the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, a widely used psychological assessment tool. However, it was during this time that Kemper revealed the disturbing facet of his character.
And out of nowhere, they found a skull up in the mountains near Loma Prieta.
Homicides in those days, so we did not have a whole lot of experience in doing this sort of thing. Do an inquiry, I could go into the computer, find somebody's criminal history, that sort of thing.
We refer to this as the golden age of criminalistics. And the reason we do that is we used all sorts of other
They also will include dental charts. So we got those dental charts, compared them to the one that we had from the skull.
He confessed to manipulating his psychiatrists, citing his ability to understand the inner workings of the tests he administered to other inmates. In a chilling admission, he acknowledged learning from the physical activity offenders he evaluated, using this knowledge to manipulate and deceive the very professionals who were tasked with assessing his mental state. Kemper's time at Atascadero was a complex period in his life. On one hand, he demonstrated a high level of intelligence and cooperated with the psychiatric staff, even making contributions to their work. His capacity for manipulation and his ability to present a facade of rehabilitation raised troubling questions about the true nature of his character. These experiences would foreshadow the enigmatic and multifaceted personality of Edmund Kemper, providing a glimpse into the mind of a deeply disturbed individual capable of both cooperation and manipulation. His time at Atascadero served as a prelude to the even more horrifying crimes he would commit in the future, leaving a haunting legacy in the annals of American criminal history. Kemper's release and transformation. After being released on parole from Atascadero on his 21st birthday, December 18, 1969, Edmund Kemper's life took a significant turn. Contrary to the advice of hospital psychiatrists, Kemper was entrusted to the care of his mother, Clarnell, who had previously remarried and taken the surname Strandberg before later divorcing again. She was residing in Aptos, California, not far from her job as an administrative assistant at the University of California, Santa Cruz. In a bid to prove his rehabilitation, Kemper actively engaged with a psychiatrist and demonstrated positive progress. This eventually led to the permanent expungement of his juvenile records on November 29, 1972. The probation psychiatrists noted that, based on their evaluations, Kemper appeared to be a well-adjusted young man with initiative, intelligence, and no apparent psychiatric illnesses. They even advocated for the permanent expunction of his juvenile records, believing it would afford him the opportunity to develop his potential as an adult. During his time with his mother, Kemper adhered to the requirements of his parole by attending community college. He harbored aspirations of becoming a police officer, a dream that was dashed due to his imposing stature. Standing at an imposing 6 feet 9 inches tall, he earned the moniker Big Ed. Despite this rejection, Kemper maintained amicable relationships with local police officers and frequented a bar called the Jury Room, a popular hangout for law enforcement in the area. Kemper initially worked in various low-level jobs before finding employment with the state of California divisions of highways. However, his relationship with Clarnell remained fraught with toxicity and hostility. They engaged in frequent and volatile arguments that were often overheard by neighbors. Kemper vividly described these intense conflicts, revealing the deep-seated discord between mother and son. Frustrated by the ongoing tension, Kemper eventually moved in with a friend in Alameda once he had saved enough money. However, he still found it challenging to fully distance himself from his mother.
Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about, and then destruction of things.
Or a gap, or let's say an adult came along and started sharing something with them or showed them a new avenue of...
To get me. And I knew I was paranoid at that moment. I knew anybody that came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or...
She kind of preceded this female movement we have now of getting rights, of getting equal rights, of getting equal...
Give her a Christmas present. Leave her alone. She got her pound of flesh out of you. I wasn't sniveling about my mother to them. I didn't like to hear what they had to say about it.
Developed, and it's not fair to talk about a dead person that way. They can't defend themselves. They can't give you another perspective on what...
Talk to me again. It was awful. It wasn't sexual or grabbing at her. I was just such a dork, taking her to a John Wayne movie.
That's normal. Not necessarily healthy, but that happens. And my dad, being the wimp out of his family...
Who incessantly called and made surprise visits. Financial difficulties further complicated his situation, leading him to return to his mother's apartment in Aptos frequently. During this time, in his early 20s, Kemper became engaged to a student from Turlock High School in March 1973. The engagement endured for over a year before being terminated due to Kemper's second arrest. The young woman's identity was kept private at her parents' request, and she was reportedly 17 and still attending high school at the time. In the same period, Kemper faced a life-altering event when he was struck by a car while riding his newly acquired motorcycle. This accident resulted in a severe arm injury, prompting him to file a civil suit against the driver and ultimately receiving a substantial settlement. With part of the settlement money, he purchased a 1969 Ford Galaxy. It was during this time that he began to notice a significant number of young women hitchhiking, which ignited a dark pattern of behavior. He started equipping his car with plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs. Initially, he picked up these young women and let them go without harm, but it was the emergence of homicidal physical urges, which he chillingly referred to as his Lil Zapples, that eventually led him to act on these impulses. Kemper's growing rage and the deep-seated societal frustrations he harbored played a sinister role in the dark path he was about to embark upon. His encounters with hitchhikers would ultimately pave the way for a series of horrifying crimes that would cement his status as one of America's most infamous serial slayers. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Edmund Kemper embarked on a horrifying slaying spree, claiming the lives of 8 victims, all of whom were young women. His method of operation was chillingly systematic. Kemper would prey on female students hitchhiking, luring them to isolated locations where he subjected them to brutal acts of violence. His victims met their end through various means, including shootings, knifings, suffocations, and strangulations. Kemper's atrocities did not end with their demises. He would transport their lifeless bodies back to their residence, where he committed further unspeakable acts. At his home, Kemper engaged in a macabre ritual. He decapitated the victims, indulged in necrophilic acts, and then dismembered their remains. This grotesque pattern of behavior was the grim aftermath of his slaying acts, reflecting the depth of his depravity. Targets of tragedy. During this 11-month reign of terror, Kemper's victims included 5 college students, a high school student, his own mother, and his mother's best friend. It is worth noting that Kemper himself acknowledged that he often sought out victims following heated arguments with his mother, who had intentionally isolated him from the women associated with her workplace. Kemper revealed that his mother would deride him. Psychiatrists and Kemper himself have proposed a disturbing theory regarding his choice of victims. They believe that the young women he targeted served as substitutes for his ultimate target, his mother. The tragic fates of Marianne Pesci and Anita Lucchesa. On May 7, 1972, Kemper's slaying spree began with the brutal slayings of Marianne Pesci and Anita Mary Lucchesa. both 18-year-old students from Fresno State University. Posing as a good Samaritan, Kemper offered to drive them to Stanford University. However, he diverted from the agreed-upon route, taking them to a remote wooded area near Alameda, known to him from his work at the Highway Department. There, he committed unspeakable acts. First, handcuffing Pesci and locking Lucchesa in the trunk before taking their lives. The chilling detail emerged that, in the midst of this horror, Kemper's actions were momentarily interrupted by an accidental touch, an event he bizarrely acknowledged. Kemper later justified his choice of victims, claiming they appeared to belong to a more privileged social class. The tragic fate of Aiko Koo. On September 14, 1972, Kemper encountered Aiko Koo, a 14-year-old dance student who had resorted to hitchhiking after missing her bus to a dance class. Kemper's manipulation led them to a remote area, where he subjected Koo to a nightmarish ordeal. After attacking and slaying her, Kemper concealed her body in his car and nonchalantly went for drinks before returning to his apartment. There, he committed further heinous acts before dismembering and disposing of her remains. The tragic fate of Cynthia Shaw. On January 7, 1973, Edmund Kemper encountered his victim, 18-year-old student Cindy Shaw, near the Cabrillo College campus. Using manipulation, he coerced her into his car and drove to a secluded area, where he callously shot her with a .22 caliber pistol. He then callously transported her lifeless body to his mother's residence. Once there, Kemper committed a series of horrifying acts. He engaged in physical intercourse with Cindy's lifeless body, proceeded to remove the bullet from her, and then carried out a gruesome dismemberment and decapitation in his mother's bathtub. Subsequently, Kemper retained Cindy's severed head for a prolonged period, using it in appalling acts of necrophilia. Eventually, he chose to bury the head in his mother's garden, a perverse gesture directed towards her. The remainder of Cindy's remains, save for her head and right hand, were discarded, and over the ensuing weeks, investigators painstakingly reconstructed the grisly puzzle. The tragic fate of Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Liu. On February 5, 1973, Edmund Kemper sought out victims on the campus of UCSC. He targeted two students, 23-year-old Rosalind Heather Thorpe and 20-year-old Alice Helen Allison Liu. Kemper utilized the sticker he obtained from his mother, who worked at the university, to approach them. In a horrific act, he fatally shot both Rosalind and Allison. After the slayings, Kemper took the victims' lifeless bodies to his car, where he proceeded to behead them. He then transported the headless corpses to his mother's residence. There, he committed further abhorrent acts, engaging in necrophilia with the remains, dismembering them, and removing the bullets to hinder identification. In the aftermath of these heinous crimes, some of the victims' remains were discovered at various locations over the ensuing weeks. The tragic fate of Clarnell Strandberg. On April 20th, 1973, Clarnell Strandberg tragically became the victim of her own son, Kemper. After Kemper returned home from a party, he launched a horrifying attack on his mother, who was peacefully engrossed in a book in her bed. Employing a claw hammer, he subjected her to a savage beating before using a penknife to slit her throat. The brutality didn't end there. Kemper proceeded to decapitate his mother and subjected her remains to further acts of unspeakable desecration. This included displaying her severed head, shouting at it, and even using it as a target for thrown darts. In a horrifying twist, he removed Clarnell's tongue and larynx, adding to the shocking brutality of his actions. After committing this atrocious act, Kemper concealed his mother's lifeless body within a closet, attempting to hide the grim aftermath of his heinous crime. Trial. Edmund Kemper's trial began on October 23, 1973. After he was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree slaying on May 7, 1973. Kemper was represented by the Chief Public Defender of Santa Cruz County, Attorney Jim Jackson. Given Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, His defense's primary strategy was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. During his time in custody, Kemper attempted suicide twice, underscoring the gravity of the charges against him. At the trial, 3 court-appointed psychiatrists examined Kemper and concluded that he was legally sane. Dr. Joel Forth, one of the psychiatrists, delved into Kemper's juvenile records and the previous diagnosis of psychosis. He also conducted interviews with Kemper, even using truth serum. Forth informed the court about Kemper's disturbing claim of cannibalism, stating that he allegedly cut flesh from his victim's legs, cooked it, and consumed it. However, Forth ultimately determined that Kemper was fully aware of his actions in each case, and suggesting that Kemper revealed in the notoriety of being labeled the Slayer. Kemper later retracted his confession of cannibalism. The trial applied the McNaughton standard, which required the defendant to prove that, at the time of the act, they were incapable of understanding the nature and quality of their actions due to a mental illness. Despite Kemper's troubled mental state, it was evident that he knew the nature of his acts and exhibited signs of premeditation.
We were good friends. We worked a lot of cases together. Person that saw them getting into a car. And that's about as far as we got at that time.
This is the point at which the kids now have to adjust to a whole new place of living.
I just was in shock. We're only 15.
Surprising, because that's really a fantasy of total control over others.
What's that? And I get on the bus.
Kemper himself took the stands on November 1st and testified that he slayed his victims because he wanted to possess them. He attempted to convince the jury that his actions could only be the result of an abnormal mind. He claimed that 2 distinct personalities resided within him and that the Slayer personality would take over, leading to a kind of blackout. After 5 hours of deliberation on November 8, 1973, the jury declared Kemper sane and guilty on all counts. Although Kemper requested the demise penalty, capital punishment was under moratorium in California at the time. Consequently, he received 7 years to life for each count, to be served concurrently. Kemper's evolving diagnosis. During Kemper's trial for the slayings of his grandparents, court-appointed psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. The diagnosis was based on their evaluation of his mental state at the time. However, there was a notable disagreement among mental health professionals. The psychiatrists at the California Youth Authority and social workers at Atascadero State Hospital, where Kemper was held, contested this diagnosis. They argued that Kemper did not exhibit key symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, such as a disorganized thought process, hallucinations, or delusions. Instead, they noted that he displayed a high level of intelligence and introspection, and his thought patterns were logical and coherent. As a result of this difference in professional opinion, Kemper underwent a re-evaluation of his mental condition. In this process, he was re-diagnosed with a personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. This new diagnosis indicated that Kemper exhibited traits associated with passive-aggressive behavior, which could manifest as resistance to authority or hostility in an indirect manner. Upon his transfer to the California's medical facility in 1973, Kemper's mental state was once again subject to evaluation. This time, psychiatrists identified a combination of antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypal personality disorders. These disorders collectively suggested a pattern of behavior characterized by a disregard for the rights of others, an inflated sense of self-importance, and tendencies towards social isolation and eccentricity. This complex journey through various diagnoses highlights the challenges mental health professionals faced in accurately assessing Kemper's condition. Kemper's disturbing confession. In his final statements, Edmund Kemper, a serial slayer who took the lives of several young women, reflects on his actions, motivations, and the profound impact on his life. He begins by acknowledging that he's not an expert or an authority, but rather someone who committed heinous crimes for almost 2 decades. Kemper starts by addressing the unsettling possibility that there may be more individuals engaging in similar crimes. He hints that the number of potential offenders might be higher than one would expect in society. He attributes his ability to evade captures for so long to the fact that he could present himself as an ordinary, non-threatening person to his victims. Reflecting on his own motivations, Kemper delves into the psychological turmoil that drove him to commit these gruesome acts. He revealed that his slayings were driven by deep-seated emotional and psychological issues, including feelings of impotence in social and physical interactions. He sought control and ownership over his victims as a way to cope with these overwhelming emotions. Kemper speaks about the duality of his life, how he could seamlessly switch between his normal persona and his alter ego. He describes the intense energy and rage that he felt, which could be triggered by mood swings. He underscores the importance of appearances, explaining how he maintained the facade of a regular person even while he committed his crimes. Throughout his confession, Kemper frequently alludes to his mother's influence on his actions. He portrays her as a toxic and domineering figure in his life, contributing to his violent tendencies. He shares disturbing incidents from his childhood, such as his mother's insistence on consuming the flesh of their pet chickens, which may have played a role in his psychological development.
Girls, we just nonstop talking. It was a nonstop conversation.
And there's a story that at one point he glimpsed her undressed in the bedroom.
Up to the Berkeley UC campus to feed the squirrels. Last night we ate fudge. I was all excited because I hadn't seen her for a while.
She was supposed to be at a dance studio. Knew what bus she was supposed to take.
Maybe you should have just missed the bus. Maybe you should have just ran over.
Frida, and Elfrida found Ed to be kind of creepy.
Kemper continues to recount specific instances of his crimes, highlighting moments where he narrowly escaped detection. He acknowledges that he could have been apprehended multiple times, but managed to avoid it due to the bystanders' reluctance to get involved or his own ability to deceive the police. He also reflects on his fascination with television crime shows and how they provided insights into police procedures and criminal behavior. He mentions the need to avoid discussing his crimes with others to evade suspicion and describes his encounters with law enforcement officers while having firearms and evidence of his crimes in his possession. In the final moments of his confession, Kemper touches upon the concept of the friendly nuisance, a term he uses to describe his interactions with law enforcement. He suggests that some serial slayers may go undetected, as long as they remain discreet and do not share their activities with others. Kemper implies that it was ultimately his decision to turn himself in, marking the end of his slaying spree. The chilling account of Edmund Kemper provides a glimpse into the mind of a serial slayer, shedding light on the complexities of his motivations, his ability to maintain a dual life, and the profound impact of his actions on his own psyche. His confession serves as a stark reminder of the dark and disturbing aspects of human nature. Imprisonment. Confined within the walls of the California Medical Facility, Kemper shared his living space with infamous figures of criminal history, including Herbert Mullin and Charles Manson. Among them, Kemper harbored a particular disdain for Mullin, whose own slaying spree unfolded concurrently and in close proximity. Standing at an imposing 6 feet 9 inches, Kemper towered over Mullin by a foot, a stark physical reminder of Kemper's dominance. In an attempt to assert control, Kemper resorted to manipulation and physical intimidation, recounting an episode where he doused Mullin with water to quell his disruptive behavior, only to later reward him with peanuts when he acquiesced. This method Kemper termed behavior modification treatment. Despite the chilling backdrop of his past, Kemper managed to carve out an unexpected role as a model prisoner within the broader inmate population. In a testament to his peculiar slays, he took charge of organizing fellow inmates' appointments with psychiatrists. Additionally, Kemper revealed a hidden talent in crafting intricate ceramic cups, showcasing a level of dexterity and creativity that defied the sinister context of his life. Furthermore, Kemper found purpose in a philanthropic endeavor, becoming a prolific narrator for an audiobook program dedicated to assisting the visually impaired. By 1987, he had become the linchpin of the prison's initiative, accumulating an astounding 5,000 hours of recorded material and several hundred completed audiobooks. This venture came to an end in 2015, following a debilitating stroke that rendered Kemper medically disabled. Tragically, in 2016, Kemper incurred his first rules violation for failing to provide a urine sample, marking a stark departure from his otherwise orderly prison record.
Message of don't hitchhike, seriously. And we did see a change.
Do you hitchhike?
Rapes and girls being chopped up and things like that.
Without any suspect whatsoever. The guy was covered his tracks really well.
Man who didn't dress or look any different than lots of student types.
It's the same acrimonious relationship with his mother that his father had had.
Sit there and not be a major part of the conversation, but he was just basically listening.
And she was really good at making pie. Everybody was always happy when she would come to a...
Throughout his imprisonment, Kemper participated in numerous interviews, shedding light on the psyche of serial slayers. FBI profiler John Douglas regarded Kemper as one of the most intellectually astute inmates he encountered. Noting his rare insight for a violent criminal, Douglas developed a personal fondness for Kemper, finding him friendly, open, sensitive, and possessing a good sense of humor. Kemper willingly discusses the heinous nature of his crimes, emphasizing that his interviews aim to prevent others from following a similar path. In one interview, he implores those struggling with violent urges to seek help, emphasizing that merely thinking about such acts is not a crime. He highlighted the insidious nature of these thoughts and their potential to spiral out of control. This motive underlined his interview with French writer Stéphane Bourgoin in 1991. Despite his eligibility for parole starting in 1979, Kemper has been consistently denied release, choosing to waive his hearing several times. He expressed understanding that society is not prepared for his reintegration, given the gravity of his offenses. This sentiment was echoed by the prosecutor, Ariadne Simmons, who emphasized the enormity of his crimes in his 2007 parole hearing. As of his last parole hearing in 2017, Kemper remains incarcerated, with his next eligibility scheduled for 2024.
Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, is an American serial slayer who slayed 8 people, including a 15-year-old girl, his own mother, and her best friend, from May 1972 to April 1973. Years earlier, at the age of 15, Kemper had slayed his paternal grandparents. Kemper was nicknamed the Co-Ed Slayer, as most of his non-familial victims were female college students hitchhiking in the vicinity of Santa Cruz County, California. Most of his slayings included necrophilia, decapitation, and dismemberment. Found sane and guilty at his trial in 1973, Kemper requested the demise penalty for his crimes. Capital punishment was suspended in California at the time, and he instead received 8 concurrent life sentences. Since then, he has been incarcerated in the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Early life. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born in Burbank, California on December 18, 1948. He was the middle child of 3 children, and only son born to Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper, née Stage, and Edmund Emil Kemper Jr. Edmund Jr. was a World War II veteran who, after the war, tested nuclear weapons at the Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California, where he worked as an electrician. Clarnell often complained about her husband's menial electrician job. Edmund Jr. later stated that missions in wartime and the atomic explosion testings were nothing compared to living with Clarnell, and that she affected him more than 369 days and nights of fighting on the front did. Weighing 13 pounds, 5.9 kilograms as a newborn,
how would you select your victims?
I didn't select them. It was random.
Also, when you feel you need to redo an answer, you can do it. You know, it's
I don't have any problem with I'd never been on a date. 16, that was cool, you know. I'd never been on a date, you know. I was locked up since I was 15. My father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner.
Kemper was a head taller than his peers by the age of 4. Early on, he exhibited antisocial behavior such as cruelty to animals. At the age of 10, he buried a pet cat alive, then dug it up, decapitated it, and mounted its head on a spike. Kemper later stated that he derived pleasure from successfully lying to his family about slaying the cat. At the age of 13, he slayed another family cat when he perceived it to be favoring his younger sister, Allen Lee Kemper, born in 1951, over him. He kept pieces of it in his closet until his mother found them. Kemper was known to harbor dark fantasies and have a morbid imagination. In his youth, Kemper performed rites with his younger sister's dolls that culminated in his removing their heads and hands. On one occasion, when his elder sister, Susan Huey Kemper, teased him and asked why he did not try to kiss his teacher, he replied, "If I kiss her, I'd have to slay her first." Kemper recalled that as a young boy, he would sneak out of his house and, armed with his father's bayonet, go to his second-grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows. Kemper also stated in interviews in his later life that some of his favorite games to play as a child were gas chamber and electric chair, in which he asked his younger sister to tie him up and flip an imaginary switch. He would then tumble over and writhe on the floor, pretending that he was being executed by gas inhalation or electric shock.
I picked them up. We drove into town about 2 miles, 3 miles. I dropped them off. I got some gas and kept right on going. Other than the experts all jumping up to give their opinions, which you've been doing for a lot of years, and unfortunately they don't hit too well. I'm saying I'd wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre.
Kemper also had near-demise experiences as a child. Once, his elder sister tried to push him in front of a train. Another time, she pushed him into the deep end of a swimming pool where Kemper almost drowned. Kemper had a close relationship with his father and was notably devastated when his parents separated in 1957 and divorced in 1961. He was sent to live with his mother, Clarnell, in Helena, Montana. Kemper had a severely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, a neurotic, domineering alcoholic who frequently belittled, humiliated, and attacked him. Clarnell often made her son sleep in a locked basement because she feared that he would harm his sisters, regularly mocked him for his large size. He stood 6 feet 4 inches by the age of 15, and derided him as a real weirdo in a phone conversation to Kemper's father, unaware that her son had been eavesdropping. She also refused to show Kemper affection out of fear that she would turn him gay, and told the young Kemper that he reminded her of his father and that no woman would ever love him.
Hit on into town, have a good time, and sneak back. It was obvious because they were grabbing the first ride they could get.
If I were to have been executed in a timely fashion, they would have had absolutely no input.
I would have killed until they gunned me down. I wouldn't have been able to reason my way out of it. I was scared to death, and I was violent. And I panicked. I thought, I just locked the car keys in it because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk.
Kemper later described her as a sick, angry woman, and it has been postulated that she had borderline personality disorder. At the age of 14, Kemper ran away from home in an attempt to reconcile with his father in Van Nuys, California. Once there, Kemper learned that his father had remarried and now had a stepson. Kemper stayed with his father for a short while until the elder Kemper sent him to live with his paternal grandparents, who lived on a ranch in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada on Road 224, about 2 miles west of the town of North Fork. Kemper hated living in North Fork. He described his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. First slayings. On August 27, 1964, at the age of 15, Kemper was sitting at the kitchen table with his grandmother Maud Matilda Huey Kemper when they had an argument. Enraged, Kemper stormed off and retrieved a rifle that his grandfather had given him for hunting. He then re-entered the kitchen and fatally shot his grandmother in the head.
An expert at hitchhiking. She had half her life in Europe. She'd hitchhiked around Europe.
It was very messy and very exciting, and everybody was dragging me off to the hospital to get sewed up and all of that.
She's very much the reason I surrendered. I picked up 2 girls who were so much like the first 2, it was unbelievable. I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk.
Before firing twice more into her back. His grandmother's last words reportedly were, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again." Some accounts mention that she also suffered multiple post-mortem knife wounds with a kitchen knife. When Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Kemper Sr., born in 1892, returned from grocery shopping, Kemper went outside and fatally shot him in the driveway next to his car. He was unsure of what to do next, so he phoned his mother, who told him to contact the local police. Kemper did so and waited to be taken into custody. After his arrest, Kemper said that he just wanted to see what it felt like to slay Grandma, and testified that he slayed his grandfather so he would not have to find out that his wife was lifeless, because he would be angry with Kemper for what he'd done. Psychiatrist Donald Lundy:
I was not in a proper state of mind to do something like that. It blew me away. I couldn't believe it. It was like it was handed to me on a platter.
Could you tell us how long you've been imprisoned?
Excuse me. And I didn't blame her even then. I'm saying it was a terrible tragedy, but boy, she didn't ever talk to me again. It was awful.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Who interviewed Kemper during adulthood, wrote, in his way, he had avenged the rejection of both his father and his mother. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts. Imprisonment. At Atascadero, California Youth Authority psychiatrists and social workers disagreed with the court psychiatrist's diagnoses. Their reports stated that Kemper showed no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking. They also observed him to be intelligent and introspective. Initial testing measured his IQ at 136, over 2 standard deviations above average. Kemper was re-diagnosed with a less severe condition.
So she attacked it because I became a cancer in her life. I reminded her every day what a rotten mother she must be. And I'm not saying she was.
And I made a quippy comment. I don't think the police translated it properly for the media because they missed it. They'd have loved
much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry.
To make things fit together inside, I was doing sexual probings and things. I mean, in the sense of striking out and reaching out and...
A personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Later on, in his time at Atascadero, he was given another IQ test, which gave a higher result of 145. Kemper endeared himself to his psychiatrists by being a model prisoner, and he was trained to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. A psychiatrist later said, he was a very good worker, and this is not typical of a sociopath. He really took pride in his work. Kemper also became a member of the JCs while in Atascadero and claimed to have developed some new tests and some new scales on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, specifically an overt hostility scale, during his work at Atascadero psychiatrists. After his second arrest, Kemper said that being able to understand how these tests functioned allowed him to manipulate his psychiatrists, admitting that he learned a lot from the offenders to whom he administered tests. Release and time between slayings. On December 18, 1969, his 21st birthday, Kemper was released on parole from Atascadero. Against the recommendations of psychiatrists at the hospital, he was released into the care of his mother, Clarnell, who had previously remarried and taken the surname Strandberg but later divorced again. Clarnell resided in Aptos, California, a short drive from where she worked as an administrative assistant at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Kemper later demonstrated further to his psychiatrists that he was rehabilitated, and on November 29, 1972, his juvenile records were permanently expunged. The last report from his probation psychiatrists read, "If I were to see this patient without having any history available..."
I was attacking her station. I was attacking her stance in that university setting.
I did an interview with her before I went to prison. It was the day I was sentenced and I was waiting for the car to prison here.
Suddenly there weren't any more. And my back hit that wall and I came out screaming and kicking and shooting.
I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her.
Or getting any history from him. I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses. It is my opinion that he made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or to any member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. While staying with his mother, Kemper attended community college in accordance with his parole requirements and had hoped to become a police officer, though he was rejected because of his size. At the time of his release from Atascadero, Kemper stood 6 feet 9 inches, which led to his nickname Big Ed. Kemper maintained relationships with Santa Cruz police officers despite his rejection from joining the force, and became a self-described friendly nuisance at a bar called the Jury Room, a popular hangout for local cops. Kemper worked a series of menial jobs before gaining employment with the State of California Division of Highways. During this time, his relationship with Clarnell remained toxic and hostile, with frequent arguments that their neighbors often overheard. Kemper later described the arguments he had with his mother around this time.
At first I was hoping I could get a vicarious thrill out of seeing those pictures and say, well, this will be satisfying enough.
Didn't go into it pre-planned or anything, but I couldn't believe that was a unique act.
I was losing a grasp on something that was too violent to keep inside forever.
And outside, I looked troubled at times. Other times I looked moody.
When he had saved enough money, Kemper moved out to live with a friend in Alameda. There, he still complained of being unable to get away from his mother because she regularly phoned him and paid him surprise visits. He often had financial difficulties, which resulted in his frequently returning to his mother's apartment in Aptos. Kemper, who was then in his early 20s, met a student from Turlock High School in a Santa Cruz beach, and the two became engaged in March 1973. Their engagement lasted over a year before being broken off due to Kemper's second arrest. Her parents requested her name not be revealed to the public. She was reportedly 17 and still attending high school at the time. The same year that he began working for the Highway Division, Kemper was hit by a car while riding a motorcycle that he had recently purchased. His arm was badly injured in the crash, and he received a $15,000 settlement in the civil suit he filed against the car's driver.
Again, so about the selection and the preparation. If I was selecting and preparing and everything was all set.
It's a difficult question to answer from my point of view because I'm obviously an involved subject.
Or looking at it, and I'm about to go crazy, literally. I'm about to go completely...
Represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her.
As he was driving around in the 1969 Ford Galaxy he bought with part of his settlement money, he noticed a large number of young women hitchhiking and began storing plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs in his car. He first picked up young women hitchhiking, then peacefully let them go. According to Kemper, he picked up around 150 hitchhikers who were in line with this pattern. This was before he felt homicidal physical urges, which he called his little zapples, and later began acting on said urges. At times, he blamed the women he slayed for hitchhiking, which he said was flaunting in my face the fact that they could do any damn thing they wanted and that society is as screwed up as it is. Later slayings. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper slayed 8 people, all women. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to isolated areas where he would shoot, knife, smother, or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home, where he decapitated them, performed irumatio on their severed heads, had physical intercourse with their corpse, and then dismembered them. During this 11-month slaying spree, Kemper slayed 5 college students, 1 high school student, his mother, and his mother's best friend. Kemper has stated in interviews that he often searched for victims after having arguments with his mother.
Hard day at work, I'm feeling like I used to feel, I've done some work that day, I've accomplished something, and I'm saying, I can't believe I did.
Good serial killer, obviously.
Yeah, but obviously very few of them could if there was only 35 serial killers.
And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
She didn't give up. I did.
And she refused to introduce him to women attending the university where she worked. He recalled, she would say, "You're just like your father. You don't deserve to get to know them." Psychiatrists and Kemper himself have espoused the belief that the young women were surrogates for his ultimate target, his mother. Marianne Pesky and Anita Lucchesa. On May 7, 1972, Kemper was driving in Berkeley when he picked up 2 18-year-old hitchhiking students from Fresno State University, Marianne Pesky and Anita Mary Lucchesa, with the pretense of taking them to Stanford University. After driving for an hour, he managed to reach a secluded wooded area near Alameda, with which he was familiar from his work at the Highway Department, without alerting his passengers.
He was raped as a kid in prison, in youth authority. And then he starts raping other people, and he's a leader of that stuff.
Pull the lever on any serial killer, right?
And I'm thinking, gee, he just killed me.
When someone abandons himself to being a victim, he's going to have to be one.
One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out.
That he had changed directions from where they wanted to go. It was there that he handcuffed Pesky and locked Lucchesa in the trunk, then knifed and strangled Pesci to demise, subsequently slaying Lucchesa in a similar manner. Kemper later confessed that while handcuffing Pesky, he brushed the back of his hand against one of her breasts, and it embarrassed him, adding that he said, "Whoops, I'm sorry," or something like that, after grazing her breast, despite slaying her minutes later. He also noted that he chose the women because they seemed upper middle class, of a better class of people than the scroungy, messy, dirty, smelly hippie types I wasn't at all interested in. Kemper put both of the women's bodies in the trunk of his Ford Galaxy and returned to his apartment. He was stopped on the way by a police officer for having a broken taillight.
Fighting my inner impulses to not go off on this woman and her 12-year-old son, who's hitchhiking clear back to Seattle. Society has to loosen up its belt a bit and admit that jailers.
They came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or quizzical look. I'd have blown their brains out thinking they were coming to get me.
So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out...
But the officer did not detect the corpses in the car. Kemper's roommate was not at home, so he took the bodies into his apartment, where he photographed and had physical intercourse with the naked corpses before dismembering them. He then put the body parts into plastic bags, which he later abandoned near Loma Pitra Mountain. Before disposing of Pesky's and Lucchesa's severed heads in a ravine, Kemper engaged in irumatio with both of them. In August of that year, Pesky's skull was found on Loma Pitra Mountain. An extensive search failed to turn up the rest of Pesky's remains or a trace of Lucchesa. Aiko Ku. On the evening of September 14, 1972, Kemper picked up a 15-year-old dance student named Aiko Ku, who had decided to hitchhike to a dance class after missing her bus. He again drove to a remote area where he pulled a gun on Ku before accidentally locking himself out of his car. However, Ku let him back inside, despite the fact that the gun was still in the car. Back inside the car, he proceeded to choke her unconscious, physically attack her, and slay her. Kemper subsequently packed Ku's body into the trunk of his car.
If my little sister told her she needed a mental hospital or a dry-out program, it peeled our skin for us.
So we set up this little scenario, and she's busily acting like she's writing, and I'm talking about all of this harebrained.
The state has made me much more credible as a human being.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there?
Yes.
Those bureaucrats took me away from her. And in 5.5 years of filter farbing around, they hand me back, and now I'm an old...
And went to a nearby bar to have a few drinks, then returned to his apartment. He later confessed that after exiting the bar, he opened the trunk of his car, admiring his catch like a fisherman. Back at his apartment, he had physical intercourse with the corpse, then dismembered and disposed of the remains in a similar manner as his previous two victims. Ku's mother called the police to report the disappearance of her daughter and put up hundreds of flyers asking for information, but she did not receive any responses regarding her daughter's location or status. Cindy Schall. On January 7, 1973, Kemper, who had moved back in with his mother, was driving around the Cabrillo College campus when he picked up an 18-year-old student, Cynthia Ann Cindy Schall. He drove to a wooded area and fatally shot her with a .22 caliber pistol. He then placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove to his mother's house, where he kept her body hidden in a closet in his room overnight. When his mother left for work the next morning, he had physical intercourse with and removed the bullet from Schall's corpse, then dismembered and decapitated her in his mother's bathtub. Kemper kept Schall's severed head for several days, regularly engaging in irumatio with it.
And here's these two probably high school girls. They looked up to be 17 or 18 years old. 100 years ago in the Old West, where someone would set up a boarding house and people who came by never left.
I'm an American, and I went off the deep end.
I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds.
Then buried it in his mother's garden facing upward toward her bedroom. After his arrest, he stated that he did this because his mother always wanted people to look up to her. He discarded the rest of Schall's remains by throwing them off a cliff. Over the course of the following few weeks, all except Schall's head and right hand were discovered and pieced together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle. A pathologist determined that Schall had been cut into pieces with a power saw. Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Liu. On February 5, 1973, after a heated argument with his mother, Kemper left his house in search of possible victims. With heightened suspicion of a serial slayer preying on hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area, students had been advised to accept rides only from cars with university stickers on them.
Like the last 2 victims, I was so pissed I'd have killed anybody that got in the car.
What were you convicted of?
8 counts of first-degree murder.
My first date was an absolute disaster. Wasn't her fault.
It exceeds the criterion of picking someone up and not getting caught. No one knows me in the county, no one.
Kemper was able to obtain a sticker as his mother worked at UCSC. He encountered 23-year-old Rosalind Heather Thorpe and 20-year-old Alice Helen Allison Liu on the UCSC campus. According to Kemper, Thorpe entered his car first, reassuring Liu to also enter. He first fatally shot Thorpe and then Liu with his pistol and wrapped their bodies in blankets. Kemper again brought his victims back to his mother's house. This time he beheaded them in his car and carried the headless corpses into his mother's house to have physical intercourse with them.
My little sister, was cheating on her husband when my mother was murdered.
What do you think society should do in generally with serial killers?
He then dismembered the bodies, removed the bullets to prevent identification, and discarded their remains the next morning. Some remains were found at Eden Canyon a week later, and more were found near Route 1 in March. When questioned in an interview as to why he decapitated his victims, he explained, "The head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy. You know, the head is where everything is at."
And a few months later, in the middle of the trial, I smashed the pen on the floor with my boot, sharpened it, got a...
The only time people got killed was when she and I was fighting like cats and dogs, and I couldn't deal with it.
I talked to her just briefly. She came, she was hovering around. I was at the jury room to the courthouse.
She went into that job sober. She came out of the job damn near canned because she went to work drunk one day.
The brain, eyes, mouth, that's the person. I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. The body is nothing after the head is cut off. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head. Clarnell Kemper Strandberg and Sally Hallett. On April 20, 1973, Kemper's mother, Clarnell Strandberg, was awakened by him coming home from a party. While sitting in her bed reading a book, she noticed Kemper enter her room and said to him, "I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Kemper replied, "No, good night." He waited for her to fall asleep, then he snuck back into her room to bludgeon her with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife. Kemper then beheaded her and humiliated her corpse, as stated in a 1984 interview. Kemper stated that he put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour, threw darts at it,
Raped, and I should have been mutilated, and I should have been screwed over and been like Charlie Manson. And knowing some of those characters and watching how easy it was for me to stumble into what I did.
And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up.
and ultimately smashed her face in. He also cut out her tongue and larynx and put them in the garbage disposal. However, the garbage disposal could not break down the tough vocal cords and ejected the tissue back into the sink. That seemed appropriate, as much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over the many years, Kemper later said. Kemper hid his mother's corpse in a closet and went to drink at a nearby bar. Upon his return, he invited his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor Sally Hallett, over to the house to have dinner and watch a movie. When Hallett arrived, Kemper strangled her to demise to create a cover story that his mother and Hallett had gone away together on vacation. He subsequently put Hallett's corpse in a closet, obscured any outward signs of a disturbance.
We are taking your son away because you must be an unfit mother. He's a murderer. He killed people. Recalcitrant troublemaker inmates, take them out back and kill them and bury them.
Term of 7 to life, which at that time was the maximum non-death penalty.
She was a haughty young lady, just kind of stuck up, distant.
And left a note to the police. It read, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday, no need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible slaying butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do. Afterward, Kemper fled the scene. He drove non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado, taking caffeine pills to stay awake for the over 1,000-mile journey. He had 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in his car, and he believed he was the target of an active manhunt. After not hearing any news on the radio about the slayings of his mother and Hallett when he arrived in Pueblo, he found a phone booth and called the police.
Consecutive would be 1 at a time, and of course you can't serve multiple life sentences, but I hated her. But I wanted to love my mother.
The only interview I did back at the time of my case. This is just a little anecdote for you here.
He confessed to the slayings of his mother and Hallett, but the police did not take his call seriously and told him to call back at a later time. Several hours later, Kemper called again, asking to speak to an officer he personally knew. He confessed to that officer of slaying his mother and Hallett, then waited for the police to arrive and take him into custody. Upon his capture, Kemper also confessed to the slayings of the 6 students. When asked in a later interview why he turned himself in, Kemper said the original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing, and at the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, I just said to hell with it and called it all off. Trial. Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree slaying on May 7, 1973. He was assigned the Chief Public Defender of Santa Cruz County, Attorney Jim Jackson. Due to Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, his counsel's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges. Kemper twice tried to commit self-hurt in custody. His trial went ahead on October 23, 1973. 3 court-appointed psychiatrists found Kemper to be legally sane.
After 2 weeks, I couldn't handle the reality of those pictures. Now, I've read where guys have hung criminals.
Because there was television available there, I had a canteen, I had some food items in my house.
It started coming to a head again, so I went back down. I ran away back down there.
And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away.
One of the psychiatrists, Dr. Joel Fort, investigated his juvenile records and the diagnosis that he was once psychotic. Fort also interviewed Kemper, including under truth serum, and relayed to the court that Kemper had engaged in cannibalism, alleging that he sliced flesh from the legs of his victims, then cooked and consumed these strips of flesh in a casserole. Nevertheless, Fort determined that Kemper was fully cognizant in each case, and stated that Kemper enjoyed the prospect of the infamy associated with being labeled a slayer. Kemper later recanted the confession of cannibalism. California used the McNaughton standard, which held that for a defendant to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason, from disease of mind, and not to know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know he was doing what was wrong. Kemper appeared to have known that the nature of his acts was wrong.
All of a sudden, somebody shows up out of nowhere. I pick them up, take them where they're going, but I didn't do nothing to them.
And I brought this pen back in. I smuggled it in with me. And I get strip shook leaving the cell.
And he had shown signs of malice aforethought. On November 1, Kemper took the stand. He testified that he slayed the victims because he wanted them for myself-like possessions, and attempted to convince the jury that he was insane, based on the reasoning that his actions could have been committed only by someone with an aberrant mind. He stated that 2 beings inhabited his body, and that when the Slayer personality took over, it was kind of like blacking out. On November 8, 1973, the 6-man, 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours before declaring Kemper sane and guilty on all counts. He asked for the demise penalty, requesting demise by torture.
Took his skull and made an inkwell out of it with gold hinges on it for the pens. This was some notorious criminal, right? I said, gee, that's kind of...
Flywheel loose and just fall apart. I say, wow, this is insane.
My gun was under the seat. What in the hell am I doing telling you that?
Because those immediately about me were very much set on destructive attitudes toward me, so I...
However, with a moratorium placed on capital punishment by the Supreme Court of California, he instead received 7 years to life for each count, with these terms to be served concurrently, and was sentenced to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Psychology. While on trial for slaying his grandparents, Kemper was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by court-appointed psychiatrists. However, California Youth Authority psychiatrists and social workers at Atascadero State Hospital disagreed on the basis that Kemper showed no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations.
Like in the Old West. And tanned the guy's hide and made a pair of shoes out of it. The doctor did, the city doctor.
And I took it back to my high-security jail cell up in Redwood City. I was really slammed down tight.
And no evidence of bizarre thinking. They further observed him to be highly intelligent and introspective. Kemper was therefore re-diagnosed with personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Shortly after arriving at California Medical Facility in 1973, Kemper was admitted to psychiatrists for reevaluation. He was re-diagnosed with antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypal personality disorders. Imprisonment. In the California Medical Facility, Kemper was incarcerated in the same prison block as other notorious criminals, such as Herbert Mullen and Charles Manson. Kemper showed particular disdain for Mullen, who committed his slayings at the same time and in the same area as Kemper. He described Mullen as just a cold-blooded slayer, slaying everybody he saw for no good reason. Kemper manipulated and physically intimidated Mullen, who, at 5 feet 9 inches, was a foot shorter than him.
Rituals that I felt I had to go through to protect myself. I was like, again, it's embarrassing. I was a youngster.
Sexual or grabbing at her, and I was just such a dork, taking her to a John Wayne movie and...
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
When I first came to prison, I had much the same attitude. It was a very defensive attitude.
Kemper stated that, Herbie had a habit of singing and bothering people when somebody tried to watch TV, so I threw water on him to shut him up. Then, when he was a good boy, I'd give him peanuts. Herbie liked peanuts. That was effective because pretty soon he asked permission to sing. That's called behavior modification treatment. Kemper remains among the general population in prison and is considered a model prisoner. He was in charge of scheduling other inmates' appointments with psychiatrists and was an accomplished craftsman of ceramic cups. He was also a prolific narrator of audiobooks for a charity program that prepared material for the visually impaired. A 1987 Los Angeles Times article stated that he was the coordinator of the prison's program and had personally spent over 5,000 hours narrating books, with several hundred completed recordings to his name.
I must have been a terrible accuser to her, a terrible accusal of what a rotten mother she was.
I do about a 45-degree angle when I get to the end. And I pull the string and it lights up this end.
They never even knew what was going on. I let them out. I would have gotten away with those two being murdered.
say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess.
Kemper was retired from these positions in 2015 after he experienced a stroke and was declared medically disabled. He received his first rules violation report in 2016 for failing to provide a urine sample. While imprisoned, Kemper had participated in a number of interviews, including a segment in the 1982 documentary The Slaying of America, as well as an appearance in the 1984 documentary No Apparent Motive. His interviews have contributed to the understanding of the mind of serial slayers. FBI profiler John Douglas described Kemper as among the brightest prison inmates he interviewed and capable of rare insight for a violent criminal. He further added that he personally liked Kemper, referring to him as friendly, open, sensitive, and having a good sense of humor. Kemper is forthcoming about the nature of his crimes and has stated that he participated in the interviews to save others like himself from slaying. At the end of his No Apparent Motive interview, he said, "There's somebody out there that is watching this and hasn't done that, hasn't slayed people and wants to, and rages inside and struggles with that feeling, or is so sure they have it under control. They need to talk to somebody about it. Trust somebody enough to sit down and talk about something that isn't a crime. Thinking that way isn't a crime. Doing it isn't just a crime."
I had to do a whole interview over once because the lady wouldn't check her audio tape recorder.
But I'm saying, wow, it's uncanny. It was almost like it was meant to be that way, and I said, wow.
And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on.
It amplified everything I was feeling. It got me really drove, and for 2 days after that, they were trying to scrape me off the ceiling.
It's a horrible thing. It doesn't know when to quit, and it can't be stopped easily once it starts. He also conducted an interview with French writer Stéphane Bourgoin in 1991. Kemper was first eligible for parole in 1979. He was denied parole that year, as well as at parole hearings in 1980, 81, and 82. He subsequently waived his right to a hearing in 1985. He was denied parole at his 1988 hearing, where he said, "Society is not ready in any shape or form for me. I can't fault them for that." He was denied parole again in 1991 and in 1994. He then waived his right to a hearing in 1997 and 2002.
A week later, I murdered my mother. Went back to Santa Cruz and killed her.
I started to run, and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there.
He attended the next hearing in 2007, where he was again denied parole. Prosecutor Ariadne Simon said, "We don't care how much of a model prisoner he is because of the enormity of his crimes." Kemper waived his right to a hearing again in 2012. He was denied parole in 2017 and is next eligible in 2024. In popular culture, Kemper has influenced many works of film and literature. He and fellow serial slayers Ted Bundy, Gary Heidnik, Jerry Brudos, Gary Ridgway, and Ed Gein were used as inspiration for the character of Buffalo Bill in Thomas Harris's 1988 novel The Silence of the Lambs. Like Kemper, Bill fatally shoots his grandparents as a teenager. Dean Koontz cited Kemper as an inspiration for Edgar Vess, the villain of his 1996 novel Intensity. The character Patrick Bateman in the 2000 film American Psycho mistakenly attributes a quote by Kemper to Gein, saying, "You know what Ed Gein said about women? He said, when I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out."
I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun.
My officer, or my lawyer, does not want me talking to the media at all, so.
A failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure.
Talk to her, be real nice and sweet, and treat her right. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick. A direct-to-video horror film loosely based on Kemper slayings, titled Kemper the Co-Ed Slayer, was released in 2008. In 2012, French author Marc Duguin published a novel, Avenue des Géants, about Kemper. Kemper was portrayed by 6'5" actor Cameron Britton in 3 episodes.
And I went to a strip cell 2 cells down, where all I had was a mattress over a hole in the floor.
As I'm sitting there with a severed head in my hand, talking to it.
Incredible energies, positive and negative.
So they have a camera on me 24 hours a day, a monitor, videotape monitor.
Number 2, 3, and 10 of the first season of the 2017 Netflix television drama series Mindhunter. Britton received a nomination for the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for this role. Kemper has been the subject of multiple books, including Edmund Kemper, The True Story of the Co-Ed Slayer, and The Co-Ed Slayer, a study of the slayings, mutilations, and matricide of Edmund Kemper III, among others. Extracts from Kemper's interviews have been used in numerous songs, including Love Hate by Dystopia, Abomination Unseen by Devourment, Forever by The Berserker.
Oh, gee, don't mind me. She kind of got hung up on my looks or whatever. She's a gorgeous young lady.
Pick up the corner of the carpet, I pull out these pictures in an envelope, and I say, "Geez, I don't believe this. Now I gotta believe it."
So I turned that light on, I opened the door, I closed the door because my mother complains of the cold coming in from the basement.
And if it had been in a city, I would have been a mass murderer at age 15.
Severed Head by Commando, New Flesh by Pitch Shifter, and Crave by Optimum Wound Profile. He is discussed in many songs, such as Edmund Kemper Had a Horrible Temper by Macabre, Fortress by System of a Down, Temper Temper Mr. Kemper by the Celibate Rifles, Slaying by Seabound, Ed Kemper by Church of Misery, Edmund Temper by Amigo the Devil, and Edmund Kemper by Skind. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.